Yay! I want to start every episode as awkwardly as possible. I think this was definitely a great start. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 131. We are back in Los Angeles, as you remember from last week's episode. We were up in Washington as well as British Columbia. We have been traveling. We did a 10-day last-minute super surprise trip through the Pacific Northwest to visit my family, Kim's family, who you haven't seen in over a year and a half, almost 2 years. So we surprised them. It was great. We did a lot of trail running, and the trip was capped off with a fantastic visit to the Cascade Crest 100, my first 100 from last year, and we just were like, what can we do with this race? So we went back and we course marked on Friday and came out and spectated and basically got caught up in everything that is Cascade Crest, because it's such an amazing race and it's such an amazing community up there. We had to get back, so we capped off our trip with that, and that is what today's episode is all about. Our guest tonight, we realized, has not been on the show for nearly 2 years, which is long overdue. Lead singer of Death Cab For Cutie, an incredible ultra runner, a good friend, the kindest guy on earth. The kindest guy on earth. It's kinder than any other one else. He actually says kindest guy on earth. Our guest tonight is Ben Gibbard. I'm really excited to talk to him because this weekend was his very first 100 at Cascade Crest. And we got the chance to see it and kind of spectate and get caught up in it. And it was awesome. It was awesome. So tonight we're going to talk to him about his experience out there, how he trained for it, how he led up to the race, and how it all unfolded for him. So welcome, everybody. Grab your beverages of choice tonight. Kim and I are drinking LaCroix. It's LaCroix. We always pronounce it LaCroix, but I think our guest loves LaCroix, or we'll talk about it during the show. I think maybe 30 minutes of the show will be dedicated to LaCroix. So get ready, everyone. Here we go. Ginger Runner Live begins. Ginger Runner. Yeah, what is up? I'm so glad to be doing the shows back on Monday. Last week's episode had to be delayed because of we had no internet on Monday, but we got it on Thursday, so we did last week's episode on Thursday. We're back to our regular scheduled program. We're back in Los Angeles. Internet is solid. I'm going to say that, and it's going to break. So let's just let's just be thankful that it is solid at this point. Tonight's episode, I'm very excited to revisit a race that is close and near and dear to both Kim and myself. It was my first 100, Cascade Crest 100, my first and only at this point, but certainly not the last. It is an incredibly difficult race through the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. Starts in Easton, Washington, does a giant 100-mile loop before returning to Easton, Washington. We're going to talk about this course because there's some things that I realized this weekend that make it very unique. And I will definitely want to talk to our guest tonight about that. Our guest, I mentioned in the pre-show, is none other than the lead singer for Death Cab For Cutie, an incredible artist, an incredible ultra marathon runner. He's very, very talented, very nice. He's the kindest guy on earth, I think is how that sucks. So now he's got the moniker kindest guy on earth. I got to make him a t-shirt now.
He's also going to have to live up to that.
He's going to have to.
Yeah, I was just saying you set a bar here that I'm going to have a really hard time living up.
That voice you hear, that is our guest, Mr. Ben Gibbard. Yay! Kindest guy on earth.
I like that too.
Coming to us live from his China cabinet. Really excited to have you, Ben.
Yep. It's I like to do all of my interviews here in the amongst all of our flatware. You know,
as I mentioned in the pre-show, Ben was a guest long ago, episode number 42, I believe, which is nearly 2 years ago. And a lot has happened since then. Ben has raced multiple ultramarathon races and done lots of training. At that point, Ben, I don't know if you can think back that far. It was so long ago.
Oh, my God.
Did you think at that point that you would be signing up for 100 at any point? Was that a goal always since starting ultramarathons that you wanted to do a 100-miler?
Yeah, I was intrigued with the 100-mile distance from the moment I first heard that humans did it. I think when you kind of when you first learn about ultramarathons, I didn't realize people could run farther than a marathon. I thought that it was like the distance that was physically the longest distance anyone could run. So when I kind of became aware of 100 milers, I was like, wow, that sounds terrifying and exciting.
Yeah.
But I also, I'm glad that I waited until roughly year 4 of running these things before I attempted it. Because I think if I would have tried to pull this off last year, I don't think I would have been able to do it. Maybe it might have been able to really, grind it out, but I feel like, I'm really happy with my kind of progression over the last couple of years and feel like I kind of picked the right time to dive into this distance.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I thought we should touch on as well, because knowing you for the last couple of years and knowing the races that you did leading up to this over that duration, you had some races that did not go well. I remember the last 2 years, you can almost divide them in half. Where the first year, nutrition I know was an issue for you, and heat, dealing with heat and stuff like that. At what point did you feel like you learned something that kind of progressed your running? Was there something specific that happened?
I think that once I got my nutrition dialed, that's when things really started to change for me. And this is a free plug, of course, but it really kind of coincided with me kind of starting to use tailwind nutrition, starting to use a liquid nutrition, because I've never done well with heat. I think anybody who's ever seen us play music before is shocked at the amount of sweat kind of coming out of my body. Like, it's really not natural.
You are a sweaty runner. Yeah,
it's disgusting. Yeah, I'll go out for a 2-miler and come back soaked.
Yeah.
My gut was always the first thing to go. And I would sometimes make poor food choices in the middle of a race, either just combining foods that shouldn't go together in my stomach, or eating too much, or going too long without eating. And then, that would just kind of throw me all off. And then anything over a 50K would start to kind of go south pretty quickly. So, around a year ago, I think kind of after a Squamish 50-mile last year, I finished, but I had a really bad day, like a really slow day, sluggish, ended with 7 miles of vomiting at the end. Even though I felt like I was ready, that my training was there for that race, I just had a really bad day. And I kind of started to look into other, I became aware of tailwind and was like, I should really try this. And I've just found for myself, like, to, go through like a 20-ounce UD bottle of that in an hour is like, that's all the fluid I need, all the salts, all the calories. So, I mean, my training really, and my races really turned around when I went to a liquid nutrition, to tailwind specifically.
Got it. We have already some great discussion going on in the chat room. I want to remind everybody that Kim is in the chat room. Kim, what are you doing in there?
Chatting it up with our favorite Monday night peeps. You were talking about nutrition, and there was a little blip in the chat room. I'm not sure who said it. I think it might have been Amber. You're talking about your nutrition and switching up your nutrition. She's wondering if you're talking specifically just for running nutrition, or if you made changes to your nutrition as in like your regular daily diet.
Good question, Amber.
Yeah. I mean, I did, around last December, I did go to a gluten-free diet, and it was more because we had Death Cab had been on tour in Europe, and I had been basically living off of bread and cheese and pizza for upwards of a month, and it started to really just like make me feel heavy and sluggish. And I just decided to take a month off of bread just because I was sick of bread. I don't think specifically because of the gluten. I'm not, I don't think that bread is evil by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not celiac or anything like that, but I just think it made me make better food choices when I was hungry. Like, I wasn't just going to, I would eat half a loaf of bread a day just over the course of the day, whether it's toast in the morning, sandwich. I'm hungry, bread with peanut butter as a snack, like bread with dinner. And it was a lot of extra calories. It It was a lot of kind of empty carbohydrates, and I just felt lighter, and it just made me make better food choices. So I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, gluten is evil. Everybody, it's a poison. It's not. It's fine. But I just found that for me, it just made me kind of eat a little more healthy, and I think had played a small part in getting a little bit faster. Making nutrition choices that gave me longer sustainable energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those two things, and I think, learning how to train better and so forth. But I think really just, I do think that kind of cutting out the bread and subsequent kind of gluten-y foods, it made a difference, I feel. I mean, because it was like on day, it was like a line in the sand where I just started getting faster. And I'm not
and lighter. I remember
lighter,
that, like
yes,
gaining or losing weight. I remember seeing you before and after that decision, and you had lost 20 pounds or something. I mean, you were never big, but it was obvious that you were getting faster and lighter at the same time, and they were contributing.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm certainly not going to attribute all of my advances over the last year solely to removing gluten from my diet, but like I said, there is a line in the sand where like I stopped eating all of this excess dead carbohydrates, and I just started feeling lighter and faster. So
yeah. Again, if you are watching the live show, we are getting tons of really great questions in here from regular viewers and new viewers. Welcome. But Kim is in the chat room pulling those questions. And a shout out to Casey Lichtai, also in the chat room, winner of Western States 100 this last year, and just a fantastic ultra runner. Ben, Casey says that she's a huge fan, and she's watching this with scrutiny, making sure you don't make any mistakes today.
I have to say, that's so cool that she's in the chat, because as I've been following her career and, seeing some kind of things that she would say along the way about, how to be successful at the 100-mile distance. And she said something that, I found, I actually put into practice at Cascade, which is like, just smile a bunch, like have fun, and when I would start to feel like really start hurting, I could feel like the distance weighing on me, and I would just like make an effort to just by myself in the middle of nowhere, just be smiling like an idiot, and like a goofy idiot. And I'm not calling Casey an idiot, of course. I'm just saying for myself. I just want to make that very clear. But like I would just be like keeping that PMA, just keeping positive, and so I have to thank her for that suggestion, because it's like, I think like when you're running a stupid long distance like that, and you just kind of you smile and realize the ridiculousness of it all, I think there's something transcendent in that. And I certainly took that from her. So thank you, Casey. I appreciate that.
She's a great example of that. At Western States, every aid station she would come into, she's just, hey, hi, how you guys doing? Everyone good? It's like, yeah, are you all right? You're at mile 85. Are you're fucking, wow. Okay, great. And Chrissy Mail also talks about that. She talks about smiling and how that just generates positivity in your running. If you're feeling terrible, fake it till you make it, almost like put the smile on, and sometimes that can turn you around. It's weird, and it totally works.
It totally works. It absolutely worked. I mean, it was just like, when I would start feeling kind of awful, it's like I would just, bask in the absurdity of spending your time doing this, and instead of asking the question, like, what am I doing out here? What's the point of all this? Just kind of flip that around, be like, isn't this crazy? What am I doing out here? This is like silly. And then it just kind of removes the weird pressure you've put on yourself to kind of do it. And you realize you've gone 10 miles and you feel better,
So let's talk about Cascade Crest. What was it about this race? Why Cascade Crest as your first 100? Did you have others in mind, or was this the one you wanted to start with?
This was definitely the one I wanted to start with. I mean, I think that, if I would have done a Western qualifier and got into that, I would have jumped on it, of course. I mean, there are obviously races that, are very prestigious, and, if one got into one of those, you'd do it. But, I mean, this is my home. This is the area of the country that I love. And Cascade Crest is a legendary race in these parts. And, I crewed Gary Robbins a couple years ago here. I paced Gretchen Walla last year, and it's just a wonderful community of people. The Rich White, who puts the race on, is amazing. Adam Huey did an incredible job of race directing this year while Rich was running the race. And, you just see the same faces, every year. The same people are running it, the same people are running the aid stations. It's just like, it is the event, the 100-miler in the Northwest. It is the race that, every local ultra runner wants to do or has done multiple times. And, I'm already, I'm less than 24, a little over 24 hours from finishing it. And I'm already thinking about going back,
Yeah.
Like I haven't had a single minute of like, wow, I never want to do that again. I mean, I've had the opposite feeling. It's like, I can't wait to do that again. That was amazing, and really across the entire course, like with the exception of the tunnel you go through for 2 miles, it's just amazing views. I mean, you get these amazing views in the first half of the course, and then the sun goes down, and then when the sun rises, for most of us at least, you're kind of starting to ascend up Thorpe Mountain, or you're going up the Needles, and you're getting this amazing sunrise on the east. And it's everything great about living in the Pacific Northwest in one race.
I definitely want to talk about the course and how it breaks down, because you phrased it right. Like it is an incredibly gorgeous, beautiful, scenic course. I only know that from running it in training runs, because last year obviously was like, the weather was completely different last year. So you don't get the views. It was a completely different experience. But you know that from pacing Gretchen during the night storm from hell. You know exactly that it's not like, oh, look, it's a view of Rainier at night with the moonlight. But this year the weather was dynamite, and it was just perfect conditions for all the runners. Let's start talking about kind of the race and how it unfolded for you. I'm actually really curious, this being your first 100, did you show up to the start line? I can relate, because this is, I just know this start line. I know this course as my first. Did you hide out in a porta potty and have a panic attack, or was that just me? Were you nervous at the start line?
Yeah. Oh, I was very nervous. I was nervous all week going into it. I mean, really, in the weeks leading up to the race, it was all I could think about. I couldn't concentrate on anything else. And the week leading up to the race, all last week, I had this kind of phantom exhaustion. I mean, I was starting to get really paranoid that I had overtrained, or that I was coming down with something, and I was just, and when you have all that time leading up to a race, something you've been anticipating at this point now for literally for years.
Yeah.
I started getting like, oh God, no, am I getting sick? Like, can I do this? Did I do enough training? Did I do too little training? And I had this similar, like a similar feeling at the start that I did when I ran my first 50K, which was Chuckanut.
Right.
Was like, you're looking around and you're just like, I don't know, am I one of these people? Like, can I do this? Am I faking it right now? Is this within my ability? And honestly, like, I wouldn't, even as I'm thinking that, and I'm, I have that, like, that doubt is creeping in, you start to realize, like, well, that's the attitude you want to have going into something like this. You want to go into a race that you want to go into something that you're not quite sure you can complete, because if it was going to be easy, I would have done it already, like if it's, you want to go in and be like, man, I don't know if I can pull this off. I don't know if this is, am I totally just over my skis here or what? So, I definitely I was nervous as hell. I was like, I don't know. I mean, every thought's going through your mind about, like, whether or not you can pull it off or not. And then all of a sudden you're just doing it. And, in the week leading up to it, my friend Morgan Henderson and I, who was Morgan's first 100 as well, we would just talk or, text and be like, I just want to start this thing. Like, I don't want to, it's like, I'm not even thinking about finishing it. I just want to start it. Because once I start it, I'm doing it, and I'm doing it until I'm done, So yeah, so I didn't have I was not so much of a panic attack, but something not that far from that for sure.
Yeah, it's weird that's exactly how the week played out for me, where it was I just want to be in it. I just want to be in the middle of it or in the first third of it, because then at least you know kind of what's gonna happen, or you have some sort of idea of how the day is gonna play out to some degree. I just wanted to be in it.
And as much as you guys want to be in it, everybody around you also wants you to be in it.
I know that you're sitting next to your fiance, and I imagine that she probably was going through like a Jesus bench, shut up already, or was she like really like supportive, or
just get started?
Yeah, let's
go.
Let's go.
Yeah,
how was that support, friends and family?
Rachel was unbelievably supportive. In all the time, she's looking at me now, in the lead up to it. And, she was very, like, all of my expressions of self-doubt, she was like, babe, you got this. Like, come on, you've done the work. I'm sure in the back of her mind, she was like, Jesus Christ, can we just stop talking about this? Can we just right. Like, can we move on to something else? But, she was very, very, patient and supportive. And it was, and then she was, crewing me the whole time as well. And, as in doing it after doing this race last year, or anybody in the audience that's done a 100-miler, like getting a chance to see your crew is like, it's the ultimate boost, and up to this date, the longest I'd done was a 100K, the Ordnance 100K, which you came out and paced me on, and Kim helped crew me. And, I appreciated that so much. And, it's interesting with this 100-mile distance, my experience being that, like, seeing your crew is even that much more of a boost, because, I saw everybody every 25 miles, maybe. I think I saw everybody 4 times. So, I was just kind of living aid station to aid station. And then with like, okay, if I go through 4 aid stations, I get to see my crew again, and, coming into like Hayak or something like that, at mile 54, I was just like feeling pretty haggard. But then like seeing everybody was just got me so hyped. And I just like, I couldn't wait to get back out there,
Let's talk about your crew, actually.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat room from Tim. He's just wondering if you had crew and pacers, and you've mentioned that. So
yeah, who did you surround yourself with, and why did you choose the people that you chose, like family, friends, that kind of thing?
Well, my crew was a good friend of ours named Sarah Gerardo, who was our crew captain. And she's about to run her first 50K at Baker Lake in about a month or so, month and a half. So we're going to be out there supporting her. Rachel is running that as well.
Awesome.
And so this was, she and Rachel, of course, was there crewing me, and they had crewed me at Sun Mountain as kind of like a primer to Cascade Crest, because Sarah really wanted to kind of like, she's new to the sport and she's kind of new to crewing, but she's like, she's one of those people who just like, immerses herself completely in something and knows everything there is to know about it before she's even, stepped foot into the arena, which was great. I'll admit now, there was a small part of me that had reservations about bringing in people who were totally new to the 100-mile distance and in a way to crewing. Rachel had done it before because we crewed Gretchen Walla last year. But, as soon as the race started and I started seeing them along the way, it was apparent that Sarah was just on it, every detail, like just on it, like so perfectly. I was like, oh my God, this woman is made for this. It's amazing.
Good.
So my sister Megan was out with us as well, kind of as moral support and kind of as a runner when I needed something. And then my pacers were Gretchen Walla, who took me from Hayak to Mineral Creek, which is about mile 54 to 77 which is the exact same section that I paced her on last year. So it was kind of cool that, last year I was like, oh man, this is great. Just be out in the middle of the night. Oh, this is fun. And she's like, death marching up to Cachila's Ridge. And then this year she was like, oh man, this is great. And I was like, and I'm just kind of death marching up the hill. And then Gary Robbins paced me, who I know you guys know and love, and who paced
Well,
you.
we know. I don't know if I'd say we love him,
Right.
but we know
I
him.
love him.
Maybe
Love
maybe
is a
love
strong word.
maybe love is too much.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I mean, when I crewed Gary at Cascade in 2014, he had told me, like, look, when you run this race, I'll pace you. So, and I obviously wasn't pacing Gary in 2014. I was just crewing, but he had offered to pace me, and so I took him up on that offer. And you know, I have to say, you know, having him for the last 23 miles was just I mean, as you know, Ethan, just amazing to have somebody who is such a wily veteran at the sport that just, you know, is getting me to do things that, like, I wouldn't have done by myself. Like, okay, hey, we're gonna run to that tree, and then we get to hike again. Like, okay, I'm just doing whatever he, you know, like whatever he says. And then we go through an aid station, and he'd kind of be like, okay, I'm gonna give you this cup of soup. You're gonna drink it, and then I'm gonna fill it up again. You're gonna drink that again, and then we're gonna go. And we're not leaving until you drink those 2 cups of soup. When I probably would have just filled a tailwind and grabbed some Coke and been out of there in 2 minutes. You know, to my detriment, not to my benefit. So I'm having him there to make sure that I was getting maybe slightly more calories than I needed, but definitely enough to get me to the finish was huge. And just, you know, he's this like crazy Canadian. He's just talking about hockey the whole time, you know?
Yeah. That's the perfect describer. You couldn't ask for a better pacer.
Mm-hmm.
I was kidding when I said that we don't love Gary. We love him beyond words. He's an amazing friend, and yeah, you can't really put anyone better in your corner at the end of a 100-miler. He just knows how to suffer and knows how to work through that. He's the only reason he's really one of the few reasons I was even able to finish last year. Kim was one and Gary was the other, because it would have been so easy for me to go, oh yeah, hypothermia, it's set in, I can't finish. But knowing that you're in the hands of someone who has so much experience was really helpful.
And well, I don't know if you, go ahead, Ben.
Okay, no, I was going to say, I hope you don't mind me sharing this memory of your race last year, but when we were at the top of Mineral Creek, which is, there's an aid station at 75, and then there's a fire road about 2 miles up from Mineral Creek, and that's where crew can meet you. They can't go down to Mineral Creek. So, and I was there with Gretchen. We were passing Gretchen off to her next pacer, and you know, Kim was there with you, Ethan, and you looked at me and you said, "This is not easy." and that put the fear of God into me about doing it the next year, because I saw you were just like, you were having a moment, you know. And you know, you were with Kim, and you were kind of like, you know, giving her a hug and a kiss, and like you guys were sharing a moment. And Gary just broke that up immediately. He was like, you know, she knows you love her. We gotta go. We gotta go. Like, he was just like, just kiss her. We gotta go. Like he was just like, there was no sentimentality with Gary at that point. He just wanted to get you out of Mineral Creek and up the ridge. And it was, I could tell like how. That was like a very emotional moment for you. You were, you know, not only with you and Kim, but also just how you were feeling in that moment. But it was also kind of funny the way that Gary just like broke that shit up. He was like, "Nope, we're not doing this right now. You can do this when you finish the race."
I mean, that's he like, I love that he did it there, because that's the last point I got to see you before the final 5 miles, where you're done at that point because it's flat road. So he knew that if I stayed too long, it probably would have been detrimental to the race. But yeah, he's a professional at that. He knows when to get you out. I'm surprised he even let you sit, because I know that you sat a couple times at aid stations, and I would think Gary would be like, "What are you doing sitting down, Ben? Get the hell up off your ass. What are you doing?" I want to make sure that we go ahead.
I was going to say to Ben, I don't know if you know Ben, but Sarah has offered up her services to me. Shall I choose to do something big next year?
Oh,
just so you know.
Yeah, you should take her up on that, because she was, she had done all of her homework on the course. Every I was dotted, every T was crossed. Like, she could charge for her services even after like one go round. I was like, this person knows what's up. Like, she knows what she's doing, and she was great. So definitely take her up on that if you're doing something big next year.
Yeah, she was very dialed. I was impressed for sure.
You know that she's a fan of the sport when you're able to crew chief 100-miler with such precision, because it's
Yep.
a different beast entirely. We have tons of live questions, live viewers who have been very patient and asking tons of really great stuff. So what do we got, Kim? We can get a couple of those in.
Sure. Since we're kind of just getting into it now, Mad Runner had a question. Ben, what was your go-to meal prior to a race and the evening meal?
Yeah, well, Ben, what was the meal you had before the race?
Okay. I'm like, ooh.
I'll preface that with like what I've eaten before, which was a terrible idea before a race, which is anything spicy. Like, just don't, if you have a race the next morning, don't get the pad thai with like the heavy spice. Don't get Indian food. Don't do spicy food. And I'll just leave it at that. So after some experience, some poor choices in the past, Rachel made some sweet potatoes and big salad, and we had some some kind of like sausages, like just cut up mustard, and it was great. I mean, it was, I feel like I've made one mistake I've made in the past, which is kind of based on my ignorance around long distance running and the stories you hear about like carb loading, is to like, if you're going to run a marathon or like some long or an ultra or whatever, it's like, just eat as much as you can the night before. It's like, no, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. You can't, 4 servings of pasta is not going to translate into like your muscles the next day
right.
to help you run faster or farther. It's just going to make you feel horrible. So that's what I had the night before.
Nice.
I was going to say, that's really funny because we recently had, I believe it was Ange Chartel on that said, sometimes I'll just eat Indian food before a race.
Complete opposite advice from Ange Chartel.
Really
very
fun.
seasoned ultra runner, incredibly fast and dominant female in the sport. Just eats whatever. Indian food, Thai
Like,
food, spicy
not
food.
for me.
So I'm kind of on Ben's wagon, though.
Yeah.
We were really surprised that she said that. But yeah, I'm on like the simple, like keep the spice flavor shit down. Just keep it as simple and processable as possible.
Yes. Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that.
With a little bit extra La Croix mixed in. This show is not brought to you by LaCroix, La Croix. But Ben does enjoy a good can of La Croix.
I do love La Croix. I do.
Rachel's like angry right now.
So mad.
I know it's LaCroix, yet I refer to it as La Croix all the time, and she really hates it. She just gave me the hairy eyeball from the couch.
The hairy eyeball. I think I did that as a joke this weekend, calling it La Croix, and she went from taking photographs of you.
So just like,
she just gave me the death stare.
That's the look.
What are you doing? It's like, oh, it's a joke. It's a joke.
She's giving it to me right now. It's the squinty eye. Yeah, and the teeth.
The teeth. What else we got, Kim?
Question from Jesse in the chat room. Ben, did you run parts of the course prior to the race?
Great question. Yeah.
Oh,
you
yeah.
get to see it.
Yeah, yes, I ran virtually the entire course before the race. A couple chunks of it, in years prior, just on scouting trips with the race director, Rich White. And I ran a really great fat ass about a month ago called the Needles 50K that Rich was putting on. That ran a large chunk of the last 20 miles of the race. And then Chrissy Mail and I went out about 3 weeks ago and ran Cachis all the way to the finish in Easton, so we could kind of get the whole scope of, there's a section of the race called the Trail from Heck. I think it used to be called the Trail from Hell. I think it's now called the Trail from Hell again. So we ran that last 32-mile section together to kind of see it, and I wanted to visualize the end of the race as much as I could. And it was funny because when Chrissy and I were out there, one of her pacers, we had done that thing where like her pacer, we dropped her pacer off so she could run a section, and then she was going to get the car and pick us up at the finish. But she ended up just meeting us at what was essentially the last aid station, 5 miles from Easton, 4 miles from Easton. So we wouldn't have to run the road back to Easton. And, I remember she was in the car. She'd probably been waiting for a couple hours. And Chrissy was like, all right, well, we don't have to run the last 4 miles. We can just get in the car and go. And I was like, I really want to run the last 4 miles. Like I have to see it in my mind's eye. I need to remember this for race day. Like I need to know what I'm in for, and just emotionally kind of what it's going to feel like to come around those corners. And honestly, the only section of the race that I didn't run was the one I had the most trouble with, the most anxiety during. And one of the low points of the race for me was Stampede to Olali Meadow, where I saw you guys, which I was so thankful that you guys came out to say hello and to give support at that aid station, because that was a rough patch for me. And I think I learned a lot of things this past weekend, but I think one thing that I will absolutely do, if at all possible, is to see as much of any course of a race as I can see before I run it, especially if it's a 100-mile race, just because knowing the back 35 miles of the course was huge, because it's really the toughest part of the race, as you can attest to, Ethan. And if I hadn't run those needles and knew kind of what I was in for, I probably would have gunned it too hard early and really blew up in the last 20 miles. Because that last 20 miles is no joke.
Yeah, the course is backloaded, it purposefully so. I feel like it's what adds the most difficulty to this course. The front 50 are not easy. You're mostly on PCT. It's also including there's a rope section and that tunnel. So there's all sorts of weird things. We can talk about the course, and I think that's probably a good opportunity to talk about this and maybe what the parts that Ben liked the most and disliked the most. One thing that we observed this weekend, and I've kind of known obviously since running it last year, but seeing it from a spectator's point of view, the course is beautifully segmented into sections that kind of help make this race so unique. The front half has a 30-mile, I think it's 30-ish miles, section of the PCT, Pacific Crest Trail. The front 15 miles are loaded with a huge climb up to Goat Peak, and now up to, is it Blowout Mountain? Is that the name of the peak?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they added 3.5 miles off of last year's course that get you up to another 360-degree peak. So you have that, and these sections are divided with little runnable sections, little connectors that you can kind of take a break and go, okay, the next bite to take a chunk out of is the PCT. So I'll go run this. And then you basically get up to this alpine lake. It's beautiful, Mirror Lake. And then you know that the next section is the ropes. It's a descent down to these ropes into this tunnel. So you can kind of like, it's great because it just divides this course up into these segments. So you mentioned the needles, Ben, and like I said, this course is backloaded. The needles are the last 20-ish miles. They're just a series of really sharp, ragged peaks that you just go up and down and up and down. And they always say, how many needles are there? Well, you'll lose count after the first 5 or something. I don't know exactly how many there are. I feel like I always lose count. But there are enough of them to make you hate them. This course, Ben, were there any parts of it that you went, that was the most beautiful section, or this was the hardest section? How did it kind of play out for you, both emotionally and physically?
I mean, I have to say, it was where I felt my most haggard, but, being on the needles when the sun was coming up at 6:15 a.m. or whatever was just absolutely stunning. I mean, it was one of those like red sky sunrises in the east, and it was just unforgettable. I mean, rain. It was like, on to the east, you had this like red sunrise, and then kind of to the slight southwest, Rainier was starting to become illuminated, from the sunlight kind of coming over the Cascades, and like. It was just amazing. I mean, it is I believe the hardest part of the course, but at that point you've been on, at least I was on had been on the course for 20 hours or something like that. And, was starting to kind of fade, but you get that burst of energy that when you're staying up all night and the sun comes up, and, climbing up to Thorpe Mountain, which is like this peak you have to kind of tag and then come back down before you hit the rest of the needles. I have to say that was probably my even though it was one of 2 low points physically for me, and it was it was just amazing. It was one of those moments in the race where you're like, I can't believe how lucky I am that I get to do this with my body, that I get to be here to see this. Cause it's like, it just took my breath away, And I believe also, the extra 3 miles that were added onto the front half, when I first heard they added 3 miles, I was like, dude, really? You got to add, it's already 100 miles. Like, you got to add 3? Like, what are you trying to prove? And then when I ran it, I was like, oh, I get it now, because the extra 3 miles just disappeared because they were so much more epic and beautiful than the original course, which kind of just, you kind of, if I recall correctly, you just kind of went over Blowout and it dumped you on the PCT. And then you're on the PCT, which is lovely. But, it's like you're in the forest and, this trails are soft and pretty runnable and it's fun, but it's not unlike where I train my training grounds on Tiger Mountain and, Squawk and those kind of places up here. So that extra 3 miles on the front was just amazing. There were, it's as if the only moments where you're not surrounded by amazing 360 views are chunks of the PCT and the tunnel, and everything else is just, if you're running it in the daylight, it's just absolutely stunning.
Did you have any major lows during the race, whether they were nutrition based or physical based or any of that kind of stuff? Did you have any major down moments in your first 100? I have to say I was kind of, yes, sort of. I was expecting way lower lows than I experienced. I had two moments that were kind of difficult. One was after Mountain Meadow, which I believe is mile 41, until I got to Olali, which is more 49, I think. Mm-hmm. I ate something at Mountain Meadow, which is certainly not the fault of the people running the aid station, but I think I made some food combinations that were not optimal, and my stomach started kind of battling some nausea, and it hung on long enough that, like, because I've had a history with, being kind of pukey, I was starting to get really paranoid, like, no, it's too early for this. It's too early. I can't, please don't let this happen now. If this happens now, then it's another, if I can finish, it's almost 60 miles of just like puking. And I can't do that. Like, I know I won't be able to, live through that. Well, I'll be able to live through it, but, I don't think I could race through it. But thankfully, I just kind of like did a lot of hiking, kind of, and just kind of fought it off a bit. And on that same section, it started to get dark, and I went to put my headlamp on, and I found like I think my headlamp was in my pack, and it somehow got turned on, and the batteries were dead. And I was like, oh no. So I'm on the side of my chair, there's no one around. It's dark. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to run the rest of the race with my cell phone, or at least, at least to the next aid station, if I can beg someone for a headlamp or some batteries. And thankfully found the spare pair of batteries, which I didn't even know if they were fresh or not. Put them in the headlamp. They were working, but then after about 45 minutes, the thing started flashing on me, and I was like, oh god damn it! Like I now have to make it. I don't know how far it is to the next aid station, but I know I have to make it and try to beg some batteries off of somebody. And then thankfully, this gentleman whose name I'm flaking right now, but he didn't lend them. He gave me an extra set of batteries, which was like, mentally really helpful, because I knew now I could at least get to Hyack, which was mile 54, where I would get my Ultraspire 600 lumen belt, which I was going to take through the rest of the evening. Mm-hmm. So that was the lowest low for sure, because with the stomach issues. But thankfully that's where I saw you guys, and I was mentioned my stomach's not feeling great. And then just going up the Needles, like going up Thorpe at like mile 85, I started to be like, oh man, this is it started to hit me that I'd been on my feet for 20 hours plus, that I've been up for 25 hours, all that stuff that my first experience with. But I'm sure anybody in your anybody watching who's done hundreds, I'm sure they all know that. It's like you can't be on your feet for a whole day, not sleeping, and not have that hit you at some point. Mm-hmm. Another good question from Casey. I liked how you pulled that one aside there, Kim. It was regarding, what was the biggest highlight? Go ahead.
A question from Casey was, what was the biggest highlight or memory from Cascade Crest besides the finish?
Yeah, finish is always number one. Man, I think it was, just like making it through the night and kind of being on the ridge on the Needles when the sun came up with Gary. I mean, it was just, that relief that you've made it through the evening, and getting that second win that's like that you get when you've, I actually was, when I was at Squamish last weekend, Rachel and I were up there. Well, obviously you guys were there as well. And we all ran the 23K together. And afterwards, we had the pleasure of meeting Anna Frost and her fiance, Braz. And he talked about the 100 miler. His advice to me was like, it's like a party, you start out, kind of pre-funking in the early day, and then you're up all night, and you're kind of like flirting with girls, and then you're like out with your friends, you start getting tired, but then the sun comes up and you're like, oh, we're going to get breakfast now or whatever. It's like that, what you used to do when you were young, what I used to do when I was young. And, and it was, I kind of held that analogy with me the whole time too, of like, isn't this great? This is so fun. When do you get to like run around the woods? It's like, I'm 40 years old. Like, it's been a long time since I just stayed up all night with my friends and did something crazy,
Yeah.
And so, when the sun came up and I was on the ridge with Gary, and at that point we were running with Rich White and his pacer BJ, and we were just all kind of punchy and telling jokes, and it was like that. I mean, I didn't have any doubt after I got to Mineral Creek that I'd finish the race, but once the sun came up and you realize like, man, it's the next day. Like, you just gotta, you could walk it in, I feel like that was the best part. That was the reward of the whole race, was being up on that ridge with the sun coming up and just being like, man, nobody gets to see this kind of stuff, Yeah. Like we're some of the only people who get to see this kind of stuff because we're crazy enough, to spend this time out in the mountains in the middle of the night,
And that ridge is so rarely accessible for just regular hikers because it takes so long to drive to one end of it. I mean, it's just rarely traversed. You really have to want to get up there to get up there. So the race is a great opportunity to get up there. And yeah, the sunrise on Sunday morning was unbelievable. It was one of those fire in the sky moments, bright red, and there's some incredible photos that are circling around. Glenn Takayama took some amazing photos, and I know Gary took one of you holding up a bottle in front of, just that classic holding up a bottle of Tailwind in front of the sun. Everybody does it. There's some good ones from that. That seems like a great memory that you'll be able to lock up and stash away for the rest of your running career.
Yeah, definitely.
We still have lots of amazing questions here. JB Benna is in the chat room. JB's an incredible filmmaker and has his YouTube channel, and I think he and his family are traveling around right now, adventuring and enjoying what running has to offer. And he's like, hey Ben, great meeting you at Todo Santos. Just wanted to ask, what is your favorite music? And this actually came up earlier from other viewers. What is your favorite music when you need some inspiration during those tough moments?
Man, I've found I've kind of switched away from listening to a lot of music. If I need a distraction, I'll listen to like audiobooks or something, just like something, because I start to find like if you're listening to like pop song format music, I become very aware of like every 3 minutes, like, well, a mile is like 3 to 4 songs on the trail, right? So if I'm trying to distract myself from how much further I need to go, sometimes music is not the best thing for that in traditional song kind of form. But at Sun Mountain, when I was kind of starting to kind of fade a bit, I put on Explosions in the Sky, who are this amazing band from Austin. They've been friends of ours for a very long time, and we love them. And their music is so beautiful and epic and sprawling, that I found myself just like running at portions during Sun Mountain, just with like tears, like just like rolling down my face, just because I was like, I'm in this beautiful place. I'm listening to my friends play, amazing records, and like everything in the world is perfect right now. And their music also is, for people who aren't familiar with it, very sprawling and epic, and the songs are long and instrumental, and it really allows one to kind of just really zone out and kind of be in the moment on the trail.
The last few miles are run along roads, and they bring you back into Easton. What was that moment like for you? Because you're able to run with pacers, crew, family, whoever you want. What was that like for you to know that you're on the final few miles of your very first 100-miler?
Well, I mean, it's, the last aid station is at mile 96-ish. And, you come off to this, long, maybe 3,000 foot descent. I'm not quite sure. If it's not 3,000 feet, it felt like 3,000 feet.
I think it's close to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, it's just switchback. There's, it's kind of not super duper technical, but technical enough after 96 miles or 90-ish miles that you're, I was like, I was very much concerned I was going to end up on my face, just because I was kind of tired. But then when you come down into Silver Creek, it's just a flat, basically road run to the finish. And so in a way, mile 96 kind of feels like it's the end of the race, it's the end of it's the end of the trail, and then you're just kind of like, getting on the road. So my crew dropped Rachel off at 96, and she ran it in with Gary and I. And, of course, those last couple miles on the road they're lame, but you're so elated that you're doing this, you're finishing this 100-mile race, that it really doesn't matter. And like, I started, I was emotional a lot of the race, and certainly towards the end of the race. But, when I was coming down the road and you pass the sign that says "Welcome to Easton," I just kind of lost it. And then I was basically in tears, like, the last like mile or so into Easton, and then just coming back to the fire station. It's just so awesome to finish a race where you started it, and it's like, I've realized, like, a lot of the races that I've run races that are point to point. I've run races that are, kind of do a loop. And, obviously this is not only my first 100-miler, it's also my first 100-mile race that, you come back to where you started. And, it's just so much has happened in that 25 plus hours that it took me to do this, that to come back the next day, and see people at the finish line. And like Adam Huey was there with the buckle, the buckle and a hood. Yep.
I was like, where's mine? And I can't just.
Aha, this is your buckle.
Oh, you took it.
I've got your buckle.
Oh yeah, they can't even tell. But Ben earned this. This is Ben's. I stole Ben's. But Ben, go ahead and show yours again.
Oh yeah, here we go.
25 hours, 18 minutes, 26 seconds. Ben Gibbard finished and completed his very first 100-miler, easily one of the most difficult 100-milers in the United States. That's not my quote. It is my quote, but it's also Chrissy Mayle's quote. Huge congratulations, Ben. It was amazing to watch you piece everything together after years of just training and working and struggling in some races and then crushing others and learning a lot more about yourself as a runner and just getting faster. And it was awesome to see it. It was awesome to see it, especially after last year when you helped Gretchen get to her finish, and you've been a big part of the race too, helping other people get their finishes. A big congratulations, Mr. Ben Gibbard, on completing your very first 100 Cascade Crest.
Thank you.
In like an incredible time too. Incredible time. 25, 18, 26 on this course that's insane, man. That's insane.
Well, thank you. I wasn't, that was, I just kind of, I found a gear and just clicked into it. And, I was kind of, I definitely don't think that, my future hundreds will go even remotely as relatively smoothly as this one did. But, it was just a perfect day. It was one of those days where like the weather was great, the body held up, the lows were not too low. And as Gary was bringing me in the last 15 miles, I kept saying to Gary, like, the other shoe's got to drop. It's got to drop at some point. Like, that moment's got to happen where I just question my whole life, and, it didn't. It assuredly will happen, on a future race, maybe multiple future races, most likely. But you know, I couldn't have gone any better. I was really, you know, I was really happy with how it all went down, and just really kind of cherishing this weekend, and I'll hold it forever. It was amazing.
And you were surrounded by friends and family. They all send their love and give you your love. They give you your love, Ben. But it was really cool to witness, dude. A huge congratulations. Those who are watching live, I hope that you maybe find inspiration here to find a goal. It doesn't have to be a 100-miler, you know. Maybe you haven't run a 50K. Maybe you haven't run a marathon. You know, let this show be proof that anybody can do these things. But set a goal for yourself, and you'll prove to yourself that you can accomplish some incredible things that you never thought possible. Ben, 4 years ago, did you think that you would ever do what you did this weekend?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, at some point I was like, we were coming down we were as we were kind of descending out of the last section of the race, I kind of was like, you know, Gary and I were having a very like emotional conversation about a lot of life stuff. And, you know, I was crying. Gary might've been crying a little bit. I'm not going to, you know, I'll let him kind of comment on that. But, you know, I just had this moment where I was just like, I was through tears, just like, man, you can really do whatever you want to do in life, right? You can really do it. It's like, this is, it's such a simple kind of Hallmark card kind of emotional breakthrough sort of, but it's really true. I mean, like, and I certainly don't think that, you know, everyone needs to go out and run a 50K or a 50-mile or a 100-mile or run anything, you know, to kind of gain this transcendence. I believe it has more to do with just like setting a goal that you feel is borderline impossible, and it doesn't have to be running or running related, physical activity related. It just like, you know, I think that is something that, you know, kind of, you know, really draws all of us to this sport. And it's the thing that I think when people, you know, say that thing that, you know, non-ultra runners say, like 100 miles, I wouldn't want to drive 100 miles, you know, or I don't want to, you know, it's like often kind of, it's like the, you know, it's the play Freebird kind of joke of ultra running, you know, the tired over, you know, everybody who says it thinks they're the first one to ever say it, you know. Right. But, you know, I think I've learned through my experience this point in the sport that is the takeaway, is that you can do anything you set your mind to. And, you know, it's a cheesy sounding thing to say, but when you experience it, you understand it. And I know you guys understand that as well. And I'm sure everybody watching understands that.
That's a good message to end the main show with. We still have a lot of questions that were asked in the chat room. Kim's pulled a bunch aside. So I think we'll do a quick post show with Ben where we just kind of rapid fire through some of your guys' questions, some really good ones. And we're going to talk about gear too, because I know people are going to want to know exactly what Ben ran in as far as gear. That's always one of the top questions here. I have to thank Ben for joining us tonight. Congratulate him and everyone that finished Cascade Crest 100 this weekend. It is a gnarly race. We got to see a lot of friends and people who maybe haven't tackled 100 do that this weekend, and it was really, really neat. A big shout out to Chrissy Mail, first female, and a big shout out to Jesse Lang, first male. Their 2 times are now new course records since the course is brand new.
New course, yeah.
But both the times are like, they could have potentially been course records on the previous course, which is just that incredible. So yeah, Chrissy Mail, Jesse Lang, just congrats to them.
And also congrats to Rich White, the RD, who
very unique. He's the race director for Cascade Crest and ran it this year because he hadn't run it for years. And so he wanted to get back on the new course this year and run it. And it was really cool. The race went off without a hitch with Adam Huey stepping into the race director role. And it was really incredible to see him go through. No crew or pacers. And
well, he did. Rich did have a pacer.
Oh, he did.
He did have a pacer. Yeah.
That's
new. I have to say, but you know, Rich ran me down in the tunnel. You know, I had seen, you know, Rich is one of those guys who is always kind of playing possum. You know, he's kind of like, I don't know, man. And you know, I don't know. I'll be back there. Hopefully, I'll finish with a cutoff. Like, I don't know, dude. Whatever. Like, he's so. I mean, he's so understated and you know, but he's a way. he's a way better runner than he leads on. And, you know, when I was in the tunnel, I could feel a headlamp behind me, and I thought it was this guy I was running with for a bit. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, what's up, dude? And it's like Rich, like right next to me. I was like, and I have to admit, I was like, I mean, not like I'm super fast or anything like that, but I was kind of like, I was really surprised to see Rich like next to me at that point, because, you know, he was, you know, I just was very surprised. And then basically we were together for virtually the rest of the race. And, you know, when we were, you know, he didn't get a pacer until I think Mineral Creek. So he was with Gretchen and I up over Cachilas Ridge and then down through Cachis. And no, I guess he picked up his pacer at Cachis. But yeah, no, he had a phenomenal race, like phenomenal day.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah. And and Chrissy, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, so are you racing this thing? What are you doing here? She's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to go out and have a good time. And then she just crushed everybody. Like,
yeah.
I mean, she's just that good, you know?
And that's another comment about her, is that she was just patient and consistent all day. I like the women's competition from 2nd through 7th got real heated after Chrissy kind of put a gap on that, because I think 2nd through 7th or something, females all came in within
an hour.
Within like an hour or something. That was pretty incredible. Yeah. But yeah, Chrissy was just patient and consistent all day and just proved smiling. And there was a comment in the chat room like, oh, you got to get Chrissy on the show. She was just on, actually. She was on
the Patagonia Live
show. And we actually talked to her about Chuckanut 50K2. We had her on an earlier episode. So she's actually been on twice. But it would be great to get her back on too, because she's always just a good knowledge dropper. Okay, again, congratulations to Ben. We're going to do a quick post show with him, just rapid fire some of the questions that popped up in the chat room here. Before we move into the post show, of course, I have to talk about it. Let me pull up the graphic, because I actually have a graphic prepared for it. The Ginger Runner Virtual Run is currently open for registration right now. It is a 120-minute virtual run. What's a virtual run? It's a run that you get to do on your own time, on your own course. You get to pick it, but the swag is what's making this thing unique. I've always wanted to do like cool Ginger Runner t-shirts and all sorts of unique stuff. I'm like, well, I don't want to just, you know, have t-shirts for sale or something. Let's have people do something with it. So there are going to be, there's 3 different registration options: the men or the women's top, singlet or t-shirt. And then there's a digital download option if you don't want to get any of that stuff. On November 19th, the Ginger Runner Virtual Run will take place at any time during those 24 hours in your local time zone. You will complete a 120-minute activity. It can be a run, it can be a walk, it can be a hike, whatever. And in return, you get some cool swag. You get a t-shirt or singlet for ladies, custom made, Patagonia.
Really nice Patagonia technical shirt.
Yeah, technical shirts. We get those from races all the time, and they're like, it's kind of garbage. Patagonia makes just the best running shirt. So we're doing Patagonia shirts. Elevation Culture, the guy who made this right here, which is my Cascade Crest elevation profile and what holds my medal or my belt buckle from last year. Eric at Elevation Culture is making handmade Ginger Runner virtual run bottle openers out of wood and metal. They're awesome. And custom patches, iron-on patches that you can stick to your hydration pack or in your t-shirt or whatever. I'd rather do patches than bibs, so that's why we're doing patches. Regardless, all the information is at gingerrunnerstore.com. If you have not registered, do so now. It closes on September 5th. All the info is over there. So please check it out. We have hundreds of people already registered, and I would love to make this from around the globe. So if you have a local running crew, do it. Consider it. Links will be in the description after the show. So that is it. Another huge congratulations to also UTMB finishers. Previous Ginger Runner Live guests, Zach Miller, David Laney, Tim Tullifson, who we actually still need to get on the show. We haven't had Tim on before. And Magdalena Bollet. US had such an incredible representation at UTMB this weekend. UTMB and Cascade Crest fall in the same weekend. It's going to be, I'd love to run UTMB someday. What I think is going to happen is I'm going to do UTMB on a non-race weekend or something. Just go and do a circumnavigating of Mont Blanc, which is something, Ben, maybe we should talk about doing that, because that would be that sounds amazing. I actually would love to do that. There was a couple articles that I've been reading this weekend from people who ran UTMB and just said, it is not a typical trail race anymore. It is thousands of people swarming onto a mountain, fighting each other to get up these single track trails. I'm like, oh man, it'd be interesting to do that course, but the weekend before, or not the same weekend as the race. I don't know. We'll talk about that. But stick around. We're going to do a quick push show with Ben and ask him a whole slew of questions that you guys have been waiting for. So thank you very much for tuning in live tonight. We'll see you guys next Monday. If you want to come back, that'd be great. Subscribe to the channel and stick around for the post show. Here we go.
Ginger Runner.
Jesse in the chat room. Welcome to the post show. Yay! Jesse in the chat room says UTMB is beginning to look a bit rock and roll marathon-ish. I'm like, that's an interesting perspective. I've never been, and I'm going to say that I definitely need to go, because I feel like the race experience there on the weekend sounds incredible. It sounds the whole town, like all the towns come out and it just turns into this huge festival. That sounds rad. But it also sounds a bit like a shit show. Like people are waiting in line to get buses, and you're not able to get to the aid stations in time to meet your runners, or all sorts of stuff like that. Like logistics.
Well, Ethan, this is what we should do. We should go the week before.
Yeah.
And just do the course. There'll be a lot of people out on the course training the course, and then just be spectators of the race, and then you get the best of both worlds.
And yeah, we've had multiple people that have been there tell us that's the way to do it.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
So you don't pay the $1,000. I don't know what the registration fee is, but I imagine it's quite large. But yeah, you go out there, and I believe there's refugios that you can stay in, so you can do sections. You can do the first 50 miles one day and the second 50 miles the second day. It's kind of like what you would do at Hard Rock if you didn't get into Hard Rock. You can go do soft rock, just do sections of it. So that sounds really appealing. And yeah, stick around for the race weekend. I'm with Ben on that. Okay, Ben, we don't want to keep you forever. Kim has pulled some questions aside from the live audience. What do we got?
Question from Raul in the chat room. Ben, what was the workout that helped you mentally prepare for the race?
Good question.
I'll give a plug to Hal Kerner for his book, his field guide to ultra running, because I've been using a modification of his training program for every distance for 50 miles and up since the book came out. And I've made some modifications just for myself, but I found that bigger back-to-back mileage days were just key. Doing like back-to-back 25 milers and then peaking out at like a 35 miler and a 20 miler, and then keeping the runs during the week as I live in Seattle, and we have these little foothills called the Issaquah Alps that I do most of my training in. Certainly during the winter I can get a little deeper in the mountains in the later summer months. But during the week, I tend to run around Seattle. There's a lot of kind of ravine parks and like little single track, emphasis on little single track parks around the city that you can get some decent vert if you don't mind running loops. And so, I found like running shorter, more focused runs during the week was much more effective for me than running like long junk miles in the middle of the week that just left me tired for my long runs on the weekend. So I don't think I ever ran more than 8 miles a day during my week, and then during the weekends, the longer back-to-backs were so key, because the second day you start out and you feel haggard, then a couple miles in, you shake all that lactic acid out of your muscles, things start to loosen up, and you feel almost better the second day than you did the first day. So, my legs never went on me on Cascade Crest, even though there's 23,000 feet of climbing. I didn't have that thing. My quads didn't get blasted. My calves felt fine. Like, I really feel it was because of those long back-to-backs that I was able to execute the race. So thank you, Hal, for putting together that program.
He says you're welcome. He was actually running this weekend. It was really it was a bummer to hear that he ended up pulling out, I think, at mile 55, going off course a little bit during the section that we marked. It was a very well marked section. He was the only person to go off course there, so it's not our fault. I felt like it was. I felt like we ruined Hal's day. But it sounds like he also had a bit of a knee issue or something that day. But yeah, he has an amazing book, which we need to bring back on the show and talk to him about it, because we have it. We have, I think, 2 copies of it. And signed copies. It is a great book. Another one of those guide to ultra marathons. If you're a beginner, it's a fantastic guide. Even if you're an experienced runner, it's good. What else we got, Kim?
Question from Josiah. Would love to hear thoughts about training while traveling and keeping a challenging schedule and changing locations.
Yeah, good question for Ben.
Balance job and training.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the better part of, I guess, since we put a record out last April, and we've been out on the road for the better part of the last 15, 16 months, whatever. So because we're in a different city every night, and I'm trying to train, I basically will look before the tour starts. I'll look at where we're going to be, like literally on a map. Like, okay, where's the venue? Okay, drop in Google Maps, open it up. Okay, is there any green space around here that I can run to? And some days it's like, oh wow, there's like we were in Richmond, Virginia on a day off and a show day. And just turned out that there was a really great municipal trail system along the river, and then which led to this really great park, whose name I'm going to forget, but it reminded me a lot of Percy Warner Park in Nashville. If anybody's ever been there or lives in Nashville, like a nice 3 or 4 mile loop, little bit of gain, nothing crazy. So I was like, okay, great. We're going to be in Richmond for 2 days. I'll do my back-to-back long runs on those 2 days. So I'll do the long one on the day off and the shorter of the long runs on the second day. I'll be a little haggard for the show, but it's nothing that like Red Bull and Advil can't fix. So, and so that's kind of just how I went about it. And, some days you're stuck in like a not great place with not great options, but then sometimes you come across some just amazing places to run that you never would have thought you would have ended up in. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a little tricky, but, it's just a matter of some, kind of looking ahead and just kind of making sure that you get your runs in.
Nice.
All right. Question from David in the chat room. What did you use for fuel for breakfast the morning of your race?
I did my kind of standard pre-run breakfast, which is about a cup of whole fat yogurt with 2 tablespoons of Udo's oil, kind of just swirled in there, and then some gluten-free Bakery on Main granola on top of that, and just mowed that.
Just mowed it. Mowed it down.
Just mowed it.
Mowed it. Good question here regarding bucket list race from Mad Runner. What's your next bucket list race?
Man, I guess it'd be kind of like many people's bucket list races, it'd probably be, Western and or Hard Rock at some point. Obviously both of those races are very difficult to get into, and I'm certainly not going to I'm not going to win my way into Western. I'm not, but now that I've got a qualifier for both of them, I'll start putting in, and I'll put in and just see, hopefully maybe, I can, maybe not with Hard Rock. I think that I just read today that they cut down the entrance for next year down to 145 from 150 something. So, and obviously there are a lot of people who've been waiting a very long time for that one, so I'm not crossing my fingers, but I think Western seems a little more doable, and hopefully I can just start putting in and get in at some point.
All right, there's a question from Elaine in the chat room, and you kind of just answered it, but she said, are you one and done, or do you have more 100-mile aspirations? So I'm guessing more hundreds are on the schedule.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually, even before Cascade, I registered for Rocky Raccoon, because I kind of, it's on paper a race that I would probably dislike, being that it's flat and loops. But that's kind of part of the reason I signed up for it. I was like, well, I'd like to do something that's the exact opposite of this. And I signed up for it because it intrigues me, because it's a race that intrigues me because it's not something that's really in my wheelhouse. But also so I could give myself something to focus on immediately after Cascade, because I really wanted to avoid that thing that I think happens to people when they do their first 100, or at least I've heard from a lot of people, where they anticipate this race for years, months, if not years, and then they do it, and then they have nothing to look forward to. you have nothing to train for. And you know, I had that experience after I did my first marathon, where like it was the LA Marathon in 2011, and I was training for it and anticipating it and waiting for it, and then it happened, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, I guess I'm just back to running 4 miles a day, I guess, around the neighborhood. Like, what am I doing now? What's my focus? So I love the training almost more than I love the races. I just like, because so much of my life is unstructured, you know, when we're not on tour or making a record, like I could literally just like sleep all day if I wanted to. I don't need to be anywhere, which, you know, that's certainly not a humble brag by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, I kind of make my own hours. I write when I write, and, you know, I don't have a traditional job. So, you know, running becomes, you know, a strong sense of like structure in my life that I have, and I really enjoy, because I don't have a very structured life.
We had good questions. This is something we touch on all the time with our guests and stuff. Gear. People really want to know about what shoes did Ben wear, what pack, and all that sort of stuff.
I wore the Ultra Lone Peak 2.5s. I wore a pair. I used 2 pair, one for the first 77 miles, and then when I had to go through a couple kind of creeks on the trail from hell, so you know, they were kind of soaked. So I was like, oh, okay, swap them out. They performed amazingly. I'm, you know, like I said, as I said with the Tailwind, like there's no sponsorship here. I just love their shoes, and I find, like, for me, I struggled with a lot of issues with plantar fasciitis and other just weird little running ailments, and I've just found like going to a 0 drop, really neutral shoe has just made all the difference for me. And I just love their shoes. Are fantastic. I love them. I say it for free. And I ran with a UD Ultimate Direction Jurek pack. It was not the most recent model, but the model that the previous model that you can really that kind of holds the 20-ounce hard bottles. I love the UD stuff. I think it's wonderful. But I've noticed that they have really moved their emphasis to the soft flask, and you know, their newer packs are optimized for soft flasks and don't take the 20-ounce bottles very well. They don't sit well on your chest, which is great if you like the soft flask. But I've kind of optimized all of my nutrition around the 20-ounce bottle. You know, the 20-ounce bottle is my fluid for an hour. That is my, you know, Tailwind, which is my salts and calories for an hour. And I just run with like a bottle an hour. That's my mantra. Like, I'm looking at my watch, I'm looking at my bottle. I'm looking at my watch, I'm looking at my bottle. Like, okay, I got to finish this bottle in 10 minutes and then go on to the other one. So I ran with that pack because, you know, it's kind of like your like trapper keeper from when you were a kid. You know, those who are of a generation with trapper keepers, like, you know, where everything fits, you know, where all your stuff is. And, you know, going to a new pack, or, you know, for a race day, even though, you know, I think they've made a lot of improvements on the new packs, which I wish I could use because they would take the 20-ounce bottles. I just love that pack, and I think their stuff is great. And yeah, I think they make great stuff.
Nice. I actually just got one of their new ones. This is Scott Jurek, I think, the new 3.0 packs. I haven't even put it on yet, but I'm finally excited to give some of the new ones a shot. But I know that what you're talking about with the soft flasks. I was like, oh yeah, there's no hard bottles with these anymore. They're moving on to that new UD soft flask. So I'm curious the ounces on it. And I'm like you, like if I'm doing liquid nutrition, I just know this bottle needs to be done in an hour. And you know, a lot of the times I'll draw a little Sharpie line on it, so an aid station knows to fill it. You know, if it's a hot day, I'll take more water. If it's a cooler day, I don't need a full 20-ounce bottle. But it's just so easy to like visually see and hold and know where you are nutrition-wise. Yeah. So I'm kind of with you.
I like the soft flasks on principle, but you know, UDs, they're only making a 17-ounce one to this point. And you know, I've run with a soft flask, and they are certainly more comfortable, and I understand why people like that. But yeah, and also, the other thing I struggle with the soft flasks is when I'm out training, you know, I tend to just fill up at creeks and streams on Tiger Mountain, or, you know, Squawk, or, you know, Cougar, or wherever else, and, you know, when I'm out there with a Stera pen, and I'm trying to make a tailwind in the bottle. I can do it. I can hold the bottle between my legs and treat the water and make it's just difficult if you're by yourself to try to do that. The soft flasks are so malleable. You can't, yeah, you know, I struggle with it. So
you can't set them on the ground. Like that's the,
exactly.
To set it on the ground. You can't do that with a soft flask. It's tough design. One last question from our live audience, Kim.
Question from Austin. Ben, did you learn anything new about yourself as a runner during your first 100-mile race? And will you run or prepare for other races differently after Cascade Crest?
You know, that is a really good question. You know, I always assumed in talking to people who'd done hundreds that when they talk about the suffering, the pain that you kind of feel, that it ramps up and up and up and up and up. Like I always assumed that, like, oh yeah, like you are going to, you know, that pain you feel at the end of a 50-miler, well then double that or triple that. That's what you're going to feel like as you're late in a 100-miler. And that wasn't my experience at all. I mean, I certainly was tired and, you know, I was like, you know, my legs were sore, you know, my feet were very sore. My feet were destroyed after this race. I mean, blisters and hot spots. Like I never had hot spots before. And when I came into mile 77, I was convinced that my feet were just 2 giant blisters. And my crew got my shoes and socks off and like, no, your feet look fine. I'm like, better check again because there's 2 giant blisters on there. It's like, no, you're fine. But no, you know, I found that, like, you know, there were kind of actually like waves of pain that I felt, of suffering, so to speak. Like, or there were moments early in the race in the 40-mile, 50-mile-ish areas where my legs felt heavier and more tired than they did at mile 80. And, you know, that was, I don't know if that's anybody else's experience or, you know, it wasn't like, I wasn't like pounding, you know, Advil or anything like that. You know, I took Enaleve around mile 40, 45, 46 maybe, I can't remember. But yeah, that was the only kind of pain med I took during the race. So it wasn't as if, you know, my legs were feeling better because I was, you know, I'd taken 8 Advils or something like that, you know. So yeah, that was kind of something that was interesting to me, that it wasn't as if you just hurt more and more and more. You know, that you were kind of riding this wave of pain and suffering, that you'll have moments where you feel really good and then moments where you feel terrible. And it doesn't just keep ramping up. And what was the second part of that question? I forgot. I'm sorry. I've been rambling.
What will you do differently, if anything, training for another 100?
You know, I think you know, there's, you know, the old adage of like, there's nothing new on race day. And I think that, you know, I made some food choices that like putting some things in my body that just looked kind of good, but probably weren't what I needed at the time. And I think, like, you know, if you're going to experiment with a new food, do it when you're training. You know, don't shove it down your gullet, you know, at mile 50 or whatever of an ultra. I will say that Rachel made me these amazing onigiri kind of triangles, you know, this, you know, the rice with a little bit of fish or avocado wrapped in seaweed. And I mean, those things were like rocket fuel. Like I had one at Hayek, took a couple with me. And I just felt the energy just like immediately. I just felt like, you know, okay, well, I'm going to eat these every race now, because these things are, you know, just power packed.
I saw those. I was wondering what those were. I think I saw them at Hayek. They look like little, like, yummy seaweed biscuits full of joy. Was that? Yeah.
They were joyful. Like, yes, they were.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Ben, thanks, man. Thanks for taking the time out tonight. I really appreciate it. You had an amazing weekend. It was really cool to watch. You totally deserve the finish and such an amazing day. You put in so much training and hard work and dedication to this, despite having a touring schedule and traveling and being across the globe pretty much all summer and fall and spring and all that stuff. So it was really cool to witness. And you and your crew are fantastic. Your crew also, big shout out to them. Really, really excited to have you on the show, man. Thank you for taking the time out tonight, dude.
Well, hey, man, it's always a pleasure. And, both Rachel and I consider you guys just invaluable friends. And it was really wonderful to see you guys out there. And this community of people that we have gotten to know and become friends with through ultra running are truly some of the most wonderful people I've ever met in my whole life. And, I'm almost just mad that I didn't get to this earlier, So, I've had a blast tonight, and I thank you for all the wonderful questions. And thank you to Casey, if she's still on, for the suggestion about smiling. That was very helpful. And thanks to Hal. And it was quite an experience, and I really can't wait to do it again.
You bring up a good point just with the community and that sort of thing. And it's definitely something that we can just mention briefly. Ben and I met for the first time during, I believe, the first Ginger Runner Live that you were on, episode 42. I think that was the first time we had really met. I think we met through Instagram, which is weird, but I think we were just commenting, and we knew that we had similar friends and we were running in the same places. And we ended up getting you on the show and kind of communicating that way. And I like, it was a cool friendship that kind of evolved over the last couple of years. Just us, you would invite me on a training run, and I would come and get my ass kicked. Or if you were in Los Angeles, we would run together, and I'd still get my ass kicked. But it's been awesome, man. It's such a cool friendship, and the community, it's like no other. And it's, you say that you wish you had found it earlier, and I am the exact same way.
Yeah.
I wish that like the Ginger Runner thing and like all of this happened 15, 20 years ago, because I've just been having so much fun over the last 6 years since we started it, that it's like, man, how can I imagine doing anything other than this? Like, this is so much fun. I get to have Ben Gibbard on the show, and we get to talk about his first 100, and I get to sit next to my wife while she plays solitaire on the computer. No, she's not the whole time. But tonight was awesome, man. Again, really great to see you this weekend, and everyone who's watching live, follow Ben on Instagram. It's cool to see his photos, because you get kind of the both worlds. You get the rock star side of things where he's on tour. You get cool tour photos, and then you get the running side of things too. And it's really fun to follow. So go to Instagram.com/Gibbstack, Gibbstack.
And before we go, questions in the chat room. Next Monday is Labor Day. Will we be here?
Oh, yeah.
I think we usually
we don't have holidays on Ginger Runner. There are no holidays. I think the only Monday, we've actually only missed maybe 2 Mondays, and the shows just have gotten moved, and that's usually because of traveling or something. Last Monday was one of the two. We'll be here next Monday unless you have plans.
I have plans.
All right, well then show's canceled. Show's not canceled. Ben, thank you for taking the time. Thanks, Rachel, for letting Ben talk to us for the last hour and a half.
Hey, Rachel, Kim and Ethan say thank you for letting us meander for the last hour and a half. Do I need to start working on that parsley right there? Is that parsley? What's that stuff right there?
That's parsley.
Do I have to pick that?
You might have to do rosemary.
Okay, I gotta do some sous chef stuff for dinner now.
Go meander.
Go meander, double deuce, my friend. That's it for tonight's episode. We'll see you guys next week.
All right.
Bye.